Hostage diplomacy, territorial expansionism, genocide. These are a few of the accusations China is facing as it takes an increasingly belligerent posture on the world stage. In recent years, Canada has been in China's crosshairs, but it is far from alone. Taiwan has long faced Chinese aggression, and today China once again blocked Taiwan from taking part in a World Health Organization meeting. China considers the island to be a breakaway province that will one day return to Chinese control. So what can Canada learn from Taiwan? Joseph Wu is Taiwan's foreign minister, and he is in Taipei, Taiwan. Minister, thank you very much for joining our program today. I want to ask you, Minister, about the Halifax International Security Forum, which chose to award Taiwan's president with a prestigious award for standing up against China's relentless pressure. But there has been reporting in this country that the Trudeau government actually threatened to pull support and funding from that security forum over this issue. Does that provide you with concern about where Canada stands relative to China and Taiwan?
If you look at the process that the award is presented by Halifax, the International Security Forum, the Canadian Parliament spoke out in unanimous way to support Taiwan. And the Canadian government is also saying that it will continue to support Halifax. So at the end, Halifax is presenting that John McCain Prize for Leadership in Public Service to President Tsai. So this is a great result. And for Halifax to present that award to President Tsai, it shows to the international community for any leader to stick to the principle of freedom and democracy, to stick to the bottom, the very shared values that we all treasured, is going to be recognized. And I think Taiwan serving as a model for receiving that award is going to tell the rest of the world, as long as we can stick to our shared fundamental values, the international community will come together and will continue to uphold that shared value and continue to fight for Taiwan's freedom and democracy.
What does it say, though, Minister, that a country like Canada, a democracy, was reportedly skittish to award this prize because of what an authoritarian government in China might do?
Well, I would say the Chinese government is very clever in using influence operation or infiltrate into democratic societies, and they may use disinformation or hybrid warfare against a democratic country. And Canada is not alone. We have taken sufficient amount of the Chinese aggression in that regard. And there are many other countries that are also suffering from that kind of Chinese aggression. You see Australia and New Zealand and part of the United States, they are also going through that. But at the end, I think it should be the government altogether, including the parliament, that will come together, the whole country is united, and then we can ward off the Chinese aggression. And for the Canadian government, I would say it's the same when the Canadian Parliament is speaking out in a unanimous way to think that the award should be given to President Tsai, that the government of Canada is coming together with the Parliament and the whole country is coming together to say to China that their pressure is not going to bear any fruit. And I think this is the way to do it. And I would encourage not only Canada, but also the rest of the democratic world, that when they feel the pressure coming from China, they should not act alone. They should come together. And the fellow democracies, when they come together, we can show strength to the authoritarian China.
Minister, I want to talk to you about China's aggression. The Chinese President Xi Jinping wants Taiwan to be incorporated into mainland China under the one country, two systems, much like Hong Kong was supposed to exist. And we now see how that has turned out for the city-state in many ways. Do you look at Hong Kong now in the context of Chinese naval vessels coming much closer to the island, Chinese warplanes flying over the island? Do you look at what happened in Hong Kong and worry Taiwan will be next?
Yes. And if you look at Taiwan, should not just look at Taiwan's relations with China, or if you look at China's aggression, should not look at Taiwan alone. I think we should look at what China has been doing in the last few years to come to a realization what the stake is in this part of the world. The Chinese government is expanding its authoritarian control over its own population, like in Xinjiang and Tibet. And it's imposing a national security law in Hong Kong and took away every bit of freedom out of the Hong Kong citizens. Now, Hong Kong is not able to enjoy the kinds of freedom, economic freedom, political freedom, and etc. Like they used to enjoy. And the way the Taiwanese people is looking at Hong Kong is that this is such a tragedy of the modern times, and we should not repeat that. And if you look at the Chinese actions, it doesn't stop at Hong Kong. Look at Chinese military activities in the East China Sea and the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea. What we see is an authoritarian regime is trying to expand its influence beyond the first island chain. And this is something that we need to worry about. And of course, in the Chinese expansion, Taiwan stands on the front line. We suffer from the Chinese influence operation, infiltration, disinformation campaign, cyber attacks, and military threat. Also, diplomatic isolation. So this is what Taiwan is going through. But Taiwan knows it very well that it is standing on the front line, and we need to be courageous in fighting against the Chinese expansionism. And we need to be courageous in safeguarding our sovereignty and our democratic way of life. We cannot allow a democratic Taiwan to be taken over by China like what China is imposed on Hong Kong. And this is our responsibility. And many countries think that Taiwan is very small. It might not stand a chance against the very big China, very powerful, very rich China. But I think the determination is there. The Taiwanese people and the Taiwanese government are determined to safeguard our democracy and our democratic way of life. And we understand that Taiwan is going to prevail at the end because we know that democracy is going to prevail.
Minister, courage is something, but it's not everything. Even the military strength of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, which in many ways shadows the island that you're on right now, that is only so much. What is the worry that you have? Let me ask you more specifically. What do you need from Western nations now as we see an increasingly aggressive China?
Well, thank you very much for asking that question, David. Taiwan is facing military threat and international isolation and all kinds of hybrid warfare coming from China. We understand that defending Taiwan is our own responsibility. And therefore, the government here in Taiwan, especially our Ministry of National Defense, is trying every way we can to make sure that we have sufficient capability to defend ourselves. So this is one thing. And we are working together with countries like the United States to make sure that Taiwan is capable of defending itself. But when it comes to Taiwan's position in the international society, we certainly hope that the like-minded countries can look at Taiwan more, pay more attention to the situation Taiwan is in as a frontline state, guarding against the Chinese expansionism. And under these kinds of circumstances, we hope that fellow democracies can voice more in support for Taiwan, especially looking at Taiwan's position as a frontline state, and showing support for Taiwan being a democracy, showing support for Taiwan being a high-tech powerhouse. And I think that is what we are looking for. If the Canadian government can continue to provide support to Taiwan's international participation, I think that will be highly appreciated. And from that, we will continue to work together with the Canadian government to make sure that human rights or freedom or democracy can continue to expand throughout the world. And Taiwan will continue to serve as a beacon of freedom and democracy in this part of the world so that more people can enjoy freedom and democracy because Taiwan as a model.
Joseph Wu is Taiwan's foreign minister, and he is in Taipei, Taiwan. Minister, Taiwan was also a beacon in terms of how to deal with COVID, particularly early on? I know now that you are dealing with larger numbers relative to what you have had, and Taiwan has much smaller vaccination rates compared to many other countries. Where do things stand, and how have you got to this position now?
Well, this is a long experience for Taiwan. I'm sure you remember what happened in 2003 when SARS hit Taiwan. It was a disaster for the Taiwanese people. It was a shocking experience for us. And therefore, the country was mobilized to prepare for any pandemic similar to SARS. So when SARS or when the COVID-19 started in China, we took every precaution to make sure that Taiwan is safeguarded. We took very serious look at the border control, and therefore the earlier experiences that Taiwan was quite successful. But of course, the COVID virus doesn't recognize any border. So as long as we started relaxing the border control, we see the cases in Taiwan, especially in recent few days, is surging. But I think it's still under control, and our command center for dealing with the pandemic is still confident that they will be able to deal with the situation. But the dilemma for Taiwan right now is that Taiwan's earlier success in dealing with COVID-19, the international vaccine programs or vaccine platforms did not think that Taiwan is in urgent need. But we all understand that the best way to deal with a pandemic like COVID-19 is through vaccination. And since Taiwan was successful in earlier periods in doing that, and therefore we were not getting the sufficient amount of the vaccines. And that's the problem we are dealing with right now. And we certainly hope that the platform like COVAX can look at the situation in Taiwan in a more serious way, or other fellow democracies that are already having a sufficient amount of vaccines can think about providing Taiwan with some vaccines. And I think the COVID situation, if it affects Taiwan, it's not just the Taiwanese people. I think it's also going to affect Taiwan's high-tech production. And if Taiwan's high-tech production is affected, I think it's going to affect the economy of the rest of the world. So that is the dilemma that we are facing right now. And I think the government right now is trying every way we can to secure more vaccines for our population.
Have you asked Canada?
We haven't. But we thought that the Canadian government has already secured some supply of vaccines, and still a large amount of vaccines are not arriving, and therefore it might not be proper for us at this moment to ask Canada.
Minister, I do want to ask you, because you speak about border controls and how restricted they have been in Taiwan since the start of the pandemic, what will it take for Canadians, for instance, to visit Taiwan? And I say this at a time when we are still having nationally 5,000 new cases a day.
Well, before the upsurge last week, actually we have already relaxed the border control. Any Canadian citizens, as long as they have a visa from Taiwan, they can come to Taiwan. But since the upsurge, we think that we need to close down our borders again, so that we can concentrate on dealing with the domestic cases. It would be very difficult for the Canadian citizens to come to Taiwan. For those Canadian citizens who have residency in Taiwan, of course, they can come to Taiwan. But other than that, it would be very difficult for the Canadian citizens to come to Taiwan at this point.
And what will be your threshold? So we have a very small number of Canadians who've had 2 shots, who are fully vaccinated. But is that your benchmark? Is that where you're likely heading? Would you allow tourists in who have not been fully vaccinated?
We haven't started that process yet. Our command center, even though they think that the vaccination is the best way to safeguard individuals' health, but vaccination is probably not the best way or the only way to protect the country from being affected by COVID-19. You know, for example, a person that is vaccinated that might still be able to carry the COVID virus, and they can still transmit. And we haven't had the full proof that those people who are vaccinated will not transmit virus. And therefore, our health experts are still studying the case. And once it is being proved that a country that is coming to what we call the low level of risk, and that the people who have twice being vaccinated will probably have a better chance to come to Taiwan for tourism. But we haven't reached that level yet.
Minister Wu, thank you very much for joining the program. Thank you for your thoughts today.
You are absolutely welcome, David.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.